Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Intentional Insights videocast. My name is Dr. Gleb Spursky, and I'm the president of Intentional Insights, a nonprofit devoted to promoting rational thinking and effective giving to build an altruistic and flourishing world. And today we're here to talk about misinformation. Now, misinformation is widespread throughout the internet, and it's really hard to fight this misinformation which is out there. But we're here with someone, Shane Greenup, who will tell us about a really interesting project that he has going on that you can make use of in your everyday life to fight this information. So over to you, Shane, to introduce yourself and your project.
Sure, thanks, Claude. A little about me. I studied molecular biology and philosophy and the history and philosophy of science back at UNSW. Started back in 2000. And straight out of university, though, I didn't end up really going into any of those fields. I sort of accidentally made a website that made me a small passive income, which allowed me to follow my entrepreneurial spirit and work on a range of different projects that interested me over the years. And it was thanks to that freedom that in 2012, I ended up starting this project, fighting misinformation, called Rbutr. Now, in starting it, I wasn't trying to start a startup. I wasn't trying to start a new project. I actually resisted it for 6 months to a year because I had enough stuff happening. I was working on other things. But it came up and it was such a simple, obvious solution to me. And I spent that 6 months looking for someone else who had done it. I was sure someone would have done it, and I couldn't find anyone. And it bothered me so much that I reached the point where I just someone had to do it, so I did. And so what happened, I can tell the story. I think it helps understand exactly what the project is very clearly. A friend shared an article on Facebook, and that article said, new study proves that vaccinated children suffer from 2 to 5 times more disease than unvaccinated children. And so that's interesting. It's a new study. Maybe there's some new information, something amazing. So I clicked on it and I read the article, and they linked through to the study that the article was based on. And I clicked on that, and the study was just a poll held by vaccineinjury.info. So they polled their visitors and said, "Oh, are your children not vaccinated? How sick do they get?" And of course, being a biased, self-selected poll, they compared that data against actual CDC data collected by doctors. So having some training in science and rationality in general, I guess, it was very clear to me what the problem with this is. But for people that don't have that background, it's not necessarily obvious. So I wanted to be able to go back to the friend that shared the original article and have them understand what the problem with this article was. So I wanted a decent rebuttal. I didn't want to be too complex. I didn't want it to be too long, but it needed to cover the points that mattered. And I spent an hour trying to find a rebuttal that already existed, because I didn't want to write it myself, because that could take me an hour or two. I just wanted to find it. I ended up spending probably more time trying to find a rebuttal than it would have taken me to write it, but I didn't expect it to take that long. I thought I could just Google it and find it. But the problem is Google is, it's keyword level. It doesn't know that I'm trying to find a specific response to this specific article. And so after this hour spent trying to find a rebuttal, the solution was obvious to me. Why is it that when I'm looking, why is it not the case that looking at this article, I couldn't just click on a button and find a list of every rebuttal that's ever been written to this page? So it seemed really obvious to me that the internet should be structured that way, that when someone writes a rebuttal, a critique, a correction, any sort of critique of another page, that critique should be connected to the page that it's criticizing. And people that are visiting the criticized page should have immediate access to all of those pages. And in an ideal world, all of those critiques and rebuttals and corrections are organized so that the best are at the top, the same as Google search results. There's a million results, but most people just read the top one, right? So same thing here. There can be 10 rebuttals, there can be 100, there can be 1,000. It doesn't matter how many rebuttals there are. You want the best at the top. And so when you visit a page, you want to be able to access the best rebuttal to that page. And then that page is just another web page. So we could have a rebuttal to that and a rebuttal to that and so forth. And so with this very, very simple idea, we can organize the web so that no matter what page you're on, you have immediate access to the strongest critique to that page. And in this way, the consequences of that are a couple of very simple things. One, outright misinformation is easily addressed at its source. Hoaxes, scams can, it's hard to be taken by a scam when the first thing you see is, the fact that someone's taken the time to explain why it's a scam and how it works. So that sort of stuff's easy. On the more complicated things like vaccines, climate change, these sort of controversial issues that split a lot of society, it's not necessarily obvious that having critiques available will change people's minds, because these are incredibly loaded topics with a lot of biases behind them. But it can organize it so that at least the debate can become a streamlined debate and save a lot of back and forth. And also, the better longer term impact is the fact that people that don't have an opinion on it, perhaps teenagers, young adults that are just first time, are able to be exposed to the full breadth of the discussion in the ideal format, the best arguments that are available, the first time they encounter it, rather than the first time they encounter it being potentially with good information or potentially with bad information, and then being stuck in that chamber of echoes. So yeah, that's the Rbutr project, just sort of quickly. I'll leave it there.
Excellent. And yeah, that's a really great mission. I mean, I really wish that all of us, had that available to us. Like, I'd love to go to a new webpage and, just be able to see who rebuts it. And that would be a very good resource for me to have. I can imagine that a lot of other folks would love to have that sort of resource. So can you share exactly how the Rbutr project is structured and how people can get access to it if they want that sort of benefit for themselves?
Absolutely. So anyone can use it right now. So we built the platform in 2012. We've done it all with our own money, essentially. We had a bit of support from an incubator that I was in 2012. We got a little bit of money through that. But since then, it's been entirely self-funded. And we have a Chrome browser extension that you can install. Easy to get. Go to rebutr.com, which is rbutr.com. Install the Chrome plugin. Or if you're on your mobile device or a tablet, any web page you look at, you can change the URL so that you add rbutr.com/ in front of the URL as it is, and it will reload that page within a frame. Now, of course, doing that, you have to think to do it, to check, whereas with the Chrome extension, once it's installed, you don't have to think about anything. It's just present, and when you land on a page which has been criticized or corrected, it will pop up that alert and says there is a rebuttal to this page. So that's the way you can access it immediately. The rebuttals themselves are added by users, so the entire thing is crowdsourced. We have plenty of ideas on how to make that partially automated. At this point in time, it's impossible to fully automate it because identifying the intent of an author is still well beyond the capabilities of natural language processing. So it's still up to humans to ultimately decide, yes, this is a rebuttal to that page, and then link the two pages together. So as for how it all works, basically it's just a database. It's the simplest thing ever. This URL rebuts that URL in a database. That's all it is. Two URLs connected to each other via an intention. And then there's a whole, how that database can be used is almost limitless, up to people's imaginations. So we have a browser extension which pops up saying this page is rebutted. We've also developed, a volunteer helped us develop a Reddit reply bot. So it scans every comment and post on Reddit, and when it finds a URL that has been rebutted in our database, it will reply to that post or comment and let them know about the rebuttal. So fully automated, and it's a good way of spreading, the value of our database. We also have a Twitter reply widget, which is not automated. So people looking at our link pages gets a list of all the tweets that have tweeted the Rbutr page, and you can choose to hit reply and send a tweet to that person saying, hey, you may want to know that this has been corrected over here. It's, things like that. And equally, there are plenty of other options. Lots of websites could use our database to plug into their own website. Ideally, like, it'd be great actually if we could talk to Facebook about it and they wanted to integrate our database into their newsfeed in some way, so when people shared misinformation, there would be like a link on the page that would click saying there are rebuttals to this. In all cases, though, people wouldn't like to have their content that they've shared tagged with "this is wrong," and that's not our objective with this. Our objective is never to have Rbutr be the source of saying what you are saying is wrong. What the objective is to provide access to the counter position, so that the full breadth of the situation is able to be accessed. I think the ability to access the full debate is far more valuable than hearing any one persuasive argument. Because as much as we like to think that, we are so clever that we can decide what is true and what isn't, we're all susceptible to biases and clever tricks. And so I think it's always very valuable to have access to a full debate before we make our minds up. And even then, usually keeping a sort of an open mind to the idea that, to never be so attached to an idea that you so very much believe that it can't be wrong.
Yeah, that's great. I really like the idea of not being attached to an idea so strongly that you can't accept that it's wrong. I think that's fundamental. That's fundamental for what we at Intentional Insights do. One of the important frameworks that we talk about is called probabilistic thinking. So thinking in probabilistic terms, how likely is your belief true? How much percentage credibility do you give to your belief being accurate? And how much do you update your belief based on evidence? And where do you update it toward? How confident are you in your belief? Because research shows that we as human beings tend to be way too overconfident in comparison to where we actually should be about our beliefs. Yeah, so this is a really, really great project. And I'm curious to hear some stories of the people who are involved in it. And what makes them passionate about it? What do they do? Tell us about some of these people and their involvement in the project and what kind of contributions they've made.
So this is kind of hard because so many people have done so much for us. The more obvious people to bring up. So I went to the James Randi Educational Foundation's conference in 2013. Some of your listeners, watchers may be aware of it, the Amazing Meeting. Mm-hmm. And at there, I gave a workshop. And after the workshop, someone came up from the audience who was a retired programmer who just said, "I want to help. What can I do?" He ended up developing our Firefox plugin. So, he gave a whole lot of his time to help expand us to Firefox. We have a guy that's still in high school. I've forgotten where he lives, but he's somewhere up northern USA. And he helped by developing the Reddit reply bot. So again, put in a lot of time to help develop that and iteratively design what the bot says in the reply, because when you automatically respond to people's posts saying, "Hey, there's a rebuttal to what you've just posted," there are lots of ways to do that poorly. And it took us lots of iterations to reach a point where now more often than not it's received as a welcome, "Oh, more information, I'm glad that you provided more information on this topic," rather than being a confronting "you are wrong" sort of feel, because no one likes that. So it's very important to try and avoid that. And another friend also gave us a lot of his time to help develop the frame. So when you add rebutr.com/ to the beginning of any URL, it will frame it. And another friend gave a lot of his time to program and improve the interface for that. So rather than say another friend and all these people, they just come from everywhere. So another skeptic from Western Australia has been helping manage social media and outreach and discussion, and of course there's all these active people that are submitting rebuttals. So because all of the development that we've had has been largely done by volunteers or by my co-founder who did all the initial development, but again, without any pay, so it's been part-time around paid work. So there's been such limited time available to get a lot of development done, which means that the system, while it works, is still bare bones by any sort of app criteria. It doesn't have gamification, which sounds manipulative when you like, oh, it's trying to like manipulate us into using it more, which is sort of what gamification is often about. But what I mean when I say it there is nothing in the system which psychologically rewards you for doing things. There's no feedback. There's no social media interface. So when people submit a rebuttal to the system, they make the connection, they hit submit, and then it shows them the rebuttal. Okay, that's done. And there's no like obvious reward for doing it. And in spite of the fact that there's no actual reward, people have been adding rebuttals nearly every day for 4 years without, like, due to personal circumstances, I haven't actually been able to work on the project much over the last 2 years. I had a son, and my wife has a chronic illness, so I've had to be a full-time dad and the way of these things. And so for a project that's had virtually no work done on it for 2 years, to have so many people continue to do this crucial work for 2 years without any obvious reward is incredibly I don't know the word for it, but like touching, rewarding, makes me so happy and blown away that people love the project so much that they'll keep working on it because they believe in the vision. And like, that's what I have to assume, that's all that's driving them, is that they love the idea so much that they'll keep working for it, even though there's no obvious reward for their actions. It's the intention, the goal is just pure. It's like, let's build this database of this map of the internet, so that as the project does eventually grow, and it will, because this database exists now. No matter what happens, we're not going to delete it. We're not going to destroy it. It will exist. And so there's value in that. And so every rebuttal that's added will continue to add value to it. And this map of idealized debates that are happening across the web will continue to grow. On that point, actually reminded me of something that I sort of skipped over earlier, which I think is very important to explicitly say, is that I think it's sort of clear that I've made the point that all we are doing is mapping one URL to another URL. But sometimes it's worth explicitly saying that we aren't creating the content. The people that are adding rebuttals aren't writing the rebuttals necessarily. They can if they have their own blog or their own place where they can write it. And that can happen, and we encourage people. If you read an article and you want to write a rebuttal, go ahead and write it and add your written rebuttal to our system. But our system is only connecting URLs between two websites, and those two websites need not have anything to do with rebuttal the platform. We are a neutral platform. And the reason I think it's so important to make this point super explicit is because the basic premise here is that the content exists. The motivated people exist. There are people out there correcting misinformation. There are people out there incredibly thoroughly and articulately expressing scientific ideas, philosophical truths, all these things. This stuff is happening. It's happened throughout all human history. The challenge is to make it so easily discoverable in the right context that we can streamline the educational process. So there are so many philosophical discussions that have happened that are thousands of years old. One that comes to mind is Pascal's wager. You know, this is a concept, this is an argument that it's been made hundreds and thousands of years. I don't remember when it was made now, but at least hundreds of years ago. And people have been writing replies to it for hundreds of years, and people have been responding to those replies for hundreds of years. And yet still people will come up onto the internet and pose Pascal's wager as if it's a new idea that no one's ever thought of before. And it would be nice that every time that happened, that person can just be directed to the best discussion that's ever taken place of it. And immediately go, oh, okay, then I can read 3 or 4 pages, 3 or 4 short articles on this topic and be brought up to date with 2,000 years worth of work on the topic, right? So this is the idea here, is that we can organize the knowledge as it already exists into some idealized discussion. And then that discussion can only be improved over time, rather than just being repeated with no context.
I really like that vision of connecting the internet and all the discussions that happen there and giving the best version of the discussions. I think it's so hard to solve these sorts of challenges, there's no kind of corporation to solve, there's no nonprofit devoted to solving them. There's only a dedicated group of people who are out to, and who recognize that this is a problem that needs solving. And it's great that you and the other people who are supporting Rbutr are helping make that happen. So I want to check with you what you think your ideal impact on the world would be if Rbutr is a success. Describe your ideal vision of Rbutr being as successful as you would like it to be, and how the world would be different as a result of it being as successful as you would like it to be.
Sure. So the vision that I have is actually really quite solid. What I want to see happen is this central database being used by the World Wide Web Consortium, someone who's central to the web, standardizing it maybe, so that perhaps every browser natively incorporates access to this database as a natural state, so that it need not change anyone's day-to-day use of the internet. Everything is exactly the same as far as the modern world is concerned. But in your browser, there'll be a button that'll be easily accessible. And I'm looking at my browser right now, and you have the URL, and on the left-hand side of the URL is a little padlock showing you that it's secure, and on the top right you've got a star for your bookmarks, and at the moment there's a camera there. So there's little bits of information that's already present in the URL bar as it is, which you can generally ignore, but it's valuable. So I can imagine there being a little thing up there that indicates there are rebuttals to this page, there are corrections, there's critiques, and when you want to, you click on it. It's not interrupting you, it's not obtrusive, it's not getting in your way, but it's present. And the reason that I think this is so incredibly important to have this this access to information, this possibility, this functionality, is because I'm thinking of the teenagers that are growing up in the modern world and in the future world, where the vast majority of their education in one way or another is coming through the internet. The vast majority of the information that they consume is coming through the internet. And the way the internet currently exists, there is no filtration, there is no censorship, there is no authoritarian declarations of truth. And even where there are, they can be ignored one way or the other. And so the internet provides information, and information can be good information and it can be bad information. And the only way to, everyone knows that the common answer to how we make sure that kids get the right information is they have to be good critical thinkers. But teaching critical thinking is an incredibly hard thing to do. And it's dependent on the school system or parents or peers or whoever it is that you depend on to teach critical thinking, and that varies from country to country, state to state, culture to culture. So the idea that we can have the entire world teach the entire next generation critical thinking so that they can get around this problem of discerning good information from bad information is absurd, and it doesn't solve the problem at all. So my vision for Rbutr is one where the internet isn't just handing out information without context. It's an internet which provides access to that information with critical analysis on every single instance. So the internet corrects itself, or the internet at least criticizes itself. And in that criticism is doing two things. There's the initial impact of every bit of information that I access, someone disagrees with it. Every time I see information, someone has critiqued it. That creates a belief that you shouldn't just trust what you read. Just a fundamental belief, and that's the first step. And this is contrary to what quite honestly, the vast majority of human history has taught us. The vast majority of human history, we have been raised within a context, often religious, where there is an authoritarian figure up the front of the church reading from a Bible, saying, this is the word of God and you have to trust what I say. In various forms, various religions, various tribal leaders, whatever it may be, just about every culture has raised their local culture and society within that context. There is an authoritarian figure. There are parents that tell you what to think, and the idea of questioning them has been out of bounds. The world's a very different place now, and now we have the internet being the authoritarian informational source. But because there's no filter, you can get great information, you can get terrible information. So there needs to be a system in place, and this system is the only answer to that, because it is a default way of saying, maybe you shouldn't trust what you read. And then when they are interested, when they do click through to the rebuttal, there is a demonstration of how to critique. And to live in a world where you always have immediate access to demonstrations of critical reading, of critical thinking, of critical writing, that becomes a normal phenomenon. And if you read one critique every day, a critical thinker, because you will see the tools of the trade, you'll see the tricks of the trade, and they will become part of how you think. So now, I don't think that this will make the entire world full of critical thinkers, but the impact of having this, remembering that the internet is one single centralized system that everyone uses, the impact of having this one centralized system always present these critical analyses to everyone on the planet. If 1% of the population, if we increase the number of people that are really solid critical thinkers by 1% of the global population, that's a lot of people. If it's by 5% or 10%, that's an awful lot of people. And so that's the goal. Bring 10% of the global population closer to the truth, make them less wrong, because they've had better access to the whole discussion rather than biased perspectives, to teach them how to be critical thinkers so that they are more critical whenever they receive information. And in that, affect global politics, affect global global philosophy, global science, the global population's perspective on how to relate to knowledge, to bring them closer to rationality. The impact of that will be so significant, so profound, that I honestly can't think of anything that's comes close in terms of impact than that. That was probably way longer than it needed to be.
No, that was just so powerful. That was such a powerful statement. I see that you're super passionate about this, and I see why. I mean, Intentional Insights itself was founded with the goal of bringing rational thinking about the world as a whole, and especially about the way we do good in the world, effective giving, to a broad audience. And spreading these ideas of rational thinking is so fundamental to improving the way we think, because the only things under our control are our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And if we can be more critical about all of these, if we can manage them better, if we can have insights into where we're going wrong and how we can correct them, we can have such a better life and achieve our goals. And what you're doing with Rbutr is helping people filter this information. I love the idea of having this be a habitual exercise in critical thinking, a habitual opportunity for critical thinking, where people just have it aware and it's there, and they when they go to Rbutr web pages, they know about it and they can check it out. Mm-hmm. It's just such a powerful thing to get people into the habit of critical thinking and present them with the opportunity. Yeah, that's great.
And of course, the goal being that they never even have to think about going. It's not about Rbutr. It's an invisible phenomenon. Like, actually, for that matter, we can liken that to SSL for anyone that understands what that is. Whenever you get a website that's HTTPS, it's secure. You don't even notice as a user when that's happening. It just does, and that's a technology that that web pages are built on, that uses the transmission of data. And so, to some extent, that's the goal with Rbutr, to be this platform that you don't even know necessarily exists. It's just it's there to provide greater value to your internet use. So yeah.
Yeah, I'd love for it to be for us to be able to secure our thoughts on the matter as we do with our security system with the HTTPS. I like that.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So I'd like to give you now the opportunity to leave our audience with any final thoughts about Rbutr and inform them once again where they can find it and who they can contact to learn more about Rbutr, giving them some contact information if they want to chat more about Rbutr with people.
Great. So the source of all information is rebutr.com. There's plenty of really good articles in the blog, in the FAQ, and just for the spelling again, it's rbutr.com. That's rbutr.com. 5 letters, super easy. And final thoughts, I think covered the key aspects of the philosophy behind it and how I hope it will work. And we've got an active community. We've got a lot of rebuttals in the platform, so you can install it and forget about it. Ideally, if you write rebuttals, if you write critiques in your own blog or wherever, keep Rbutr in mind. Don't forget to submit it to the platform. It will bring traffic to your blog from the people that you're rebutting. That's the objective, right? Get traffic from the people whose minds you are trying to change. So use Rbutr for that purpose. And whenever you read someone else's rebuttal as well, it doesn't have to be your own. If you read one, hey, this is a rebuttal, submit it. The more people we have doing that, the better, the more pervasive, the better the system is, the more content we have. At the moment, I am starting to look at philanthropic organizations to find some support in the form of grants or anything like that. So very interested in any connections with anyone that can help with that process, or anyone that can suggest appropriate organizations that may be interested in taking on a project like this to help us bring critical thinking to the world and to improve education. I think any organization like that, we're very interested in connections. So yeah, please keep us in mind and please do reach out. Very easy to find us on Facebook and Twitter and everything, or you can just email me, shane@rebutr.com.
Excellent. And I think that's a great message to leave the people with, what they can do. And I hope you will take the opportunity to install Rbutr on your Chrome, or I understand there's a Firefox plugin available. So, and visit Rbutr, check it out, consider engaging with the community, and both using it and helping contribute to it. All right, everyone. This has been another episode of the Intentional Insights videocast. My name is Dr. Gleb Sapurski. Good night to you all.